They put a gun to my head and gave me two options: send my father to prison for crimes he didn't commit, or watch him die in front of me. I'm 32 years old. I was head of security at the biggest casino on the Las Vegas Strip. I thought I knew how dirty this city was. I had no idea. The slot machines you play? Rigged. The jackpots you see people win on TV? Staged. The billionaire owner who smiles in commercials. He's running the largest theft operation in Nevada history. And when my father, an honest dealer for 35 years, figured it out, they made me the weapon that destroyed him. Before I tell you how deep this fraud goes, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This confession could end my life. The casino industry has billions of dollars and unlimited power to bury the truth. Subscribe now, because what I'm about to expose isn't just my story. It's the reality of how Las Vegas really operates. Every person who's ever played a slot machine needs to hear this. I was born in Las Vegas in 1992, which makes me a rare breed, a true Vegas native. Most people in this city are transplants, chasing dreams or running from problems. My family was different. My father, Robert Chen, came to Vegas in 1987 from San Francisco. He was 23 years old, with a community college degree and ambition to work in the gaming industry. He started as a floor runner at the Old Dunes Casino, worked his way up to dealer, and by the time I was born, he was dealing high-stakes blackjack at the Mirage. My father loved Las Vegas, not for the vice or the excess, but for the mathematics. He was fascinated by probability theory, by the elegant simplicity of games designed to favor the house by precise percentages. He believed gambling was honest in its dishonesty. The odds were clear, the house edge was known, and if you played long enough, the math always won. He saw beauty in that certainty. He raised me with that philosophy. He taught me card counting as a math exercise when I was 12, not to cheat, but to understand probability. He showed me how casinos tracked players, how surveillance systems worked, how security identified advantage players. By the time I was 16, I could spot a card counter from across a casino floor just by watching their betting patterns. My path into casino security was natural. I studied criminal justice at UNLV, while working part-time as a security guard at several smaller casinos. The work suited me: pattern recognition, threat assessment, understanding human behavior under stress. After graduation, I landed a job in the surveillance department at the Venetian. 3 years later, I moved to the Luxor as a floor supervisor. By 28, I was assistant director of security at the newly opened Apex Resort and Casino, the crown jewel of billionaire casino mogul Richard Holloway's empire. The Apex was everything Vegas promised to be: a 75-story glass tower with 4,000 rooms, 12 restaurants, a nightclub that hosted international DJs, and a casino floor bigger than 3 football fields. The slot machines alone numbered over 3,000. The sportsbook could handle 10,000 simultaneous bets. The high-limit room saw individual wagers that exceeded the annual income of most American families. Money moved through the Apex like water through Hoover Dam, constant, massive, inevitable. Richard Holloway was Vegas royalty. He owned 9 casinos across Nevada, 3 more in Atlantic City, and partnerships in Macau and Singapore. His net worth was estimated at $8 billion. He appeared on CNBC discussing gaming industry trends. He testified before Congress about responsible gambling initiatives. He donated millions to UNLV's hospitality program and funded a children's hospital wing that bore his name. His public image was impeccable. A savvy businessman who'd built an empire through smart investments and superior customer service. I met Holloway exactly 3 times in my first year at the Apex. He was always cordial, professional, complimentary of our security operations. He seemed genuinely invested in running a clean, legitimate operation. I had no reason to suspect otherwise. My father had been dealing at the Apex since it opened. After 35 years in the industry, he'd earned the respect that came with longevity and competence. He worked the high-limit tables, dealing to whales who bet hundreds of thousands per hand. He'd seen every scam, every angle, every way players tried to beat the house. He was the kind of dealer casinos trusted completely. We'd have lunch together twice a week in the employee cafeteria. Those lunches were the highlight of my schedule. A chance to decompress, to talk about the industry we both loved, to maintain the close relationship we'd always had. He was proud of my rise through the security ranks. I was proud to work in the same building where he dealt cards. Everything changed in March 2024. My father mentioned during lunch that he'd noticed something odd about the slot machines near his table section. Players were losing at rates that seemed statistically improbable. He understood variance and standard deviation. Short-term fluctuations were normal. But over 6 months, he'd observed patterns that defied the mathematics he knew so well. Machines that should hit certain payout thresholds weren't hitting them. Progressive jackpots that should trigger within predictable ranges were going tens of thousands of spins beyond expected probability. I told him he was probably just noticing selective data, that humans are wired to see patterns even in randomness. He agreed it was possible, but something in his voice suggested he wasn't convinced. 2 weeks later, he brought it up again. He'd started keeping informal notes, nothing official, just observations during his breaks and before his shifts. Certain machines, particularly the newer video slots, showed payout patterns that were mathematically suspect. He stressed he wasn't accusing anyone of anything. He just thought maybe there were software glitches that needed attention. Maybe I could mention it to the slot operations team. I should have handled it differently. I should have brushed it off, changed the subject, told him to focus on dealing cards and let other departments handle machine operations. Instead, because I trusted the system and wanted to prove to my father that his concerns were unfounded, I filed an informal inquiry with our slot operations manager. That inquiry triggered the cascade that destroyed everything. 3 days after I filed the inquiry, my director called me into his office. Vincent Marcuso was a 25-year casino security veteran, former LVMPD detective, exactly the kind of experienced professional you'd want running security at a major resort. He'd always been supportive of my career development. We had a good working relationship built on mutual respect. That day, his demeanor was different. Tense, careful. He closed his office door and activated a white noise generator, a device we used when discussing sensitive security matters to prevent eavesdropping. Then he told me my inquiry had reached executive-level attention. Richard Holloway himself wanted to meet with me. The meeting was scheduled for that evening at Holloway's private office in the Apex Tower, not the executive suite on the casino level, but a separate office on the 60th floor, accessible only by private elevator. I'd never been there. Most employees hadn't even known it existed. Vincent accompanied me. We rode the elevator in silence. When we entered Holloway's office, I was struck by how un-Vegas it was. No flashy decor, no gambling memorabilia, just expensive minimalist furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Strip, and the quiet authority of serious money. Holloway was there with 2 other men. One was our CFO, Gerald Parks. The other was someone I'd never seen before. Late 50s, expensive suit, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in corporate boardrooms or federal courtrooms. Holloway got straight to business. He thanked me for my diligence in reporting concerns about machine performance. He explained that the Apex, like all modern casinos, used sophisticated slot management systems that adjusted payout percentages within Nevada Gaming Control Board regulations. These adjustments were legal, documented, and regularly audited. What my father had observed was simply the system working as designed, optimizing house advantage while remaining compliant with all gaming regulations. He assured me there was no fraud, no criminal activity, nothing improper, just smart business practices that maximized profitability while staying within legal bounds. He appreciated my father's attention to detail, but suggested that dealers sometimes misunderstood the technical complexity of modern slot operations. I should have accepted that explanation and left. The meeting should have ended there. But something in the way the unnamed man watched me, silent, assessing, calculating, made me uneasy, and I made the mistake of asking one additional question. I asked if the adjustments were disclosed to players, since Nevada law required that slot payout percentages be posted and accurate. The temperature in the room dropped. Holloway's friendly demeanor shifted. Not to anger, that would have been less frightening. He shifted to something colder, more transactional. He explained that I seemed to have some fundamental misunderstandings about how the gaming industry operated at the executive level. These misunderstandings, if left unaddressed, could create problems for my career and potentially for my father's continued employment. The unnamed man finally spoke. His voice was neutral, professional, completely devoid of emotion. He explained that my father's observations, while incorrect, had raised flags in their risk management system. An employee noticing and discussing machine payout patterns, even informally, represented a security concern. There were procedures for handling such concerns, procedures designed to protect both the casino's interests and the employee's reputation. Then he asked me directly if my father had discussed his observations with anyone else, other dealers, players, anyone outside the casino. I said no. It had just been conversations between us during lunch. The man seemed satisfied with that answer. He said that was good, that it simplified the situation considerably. Then he outlined what would happen next. My father would be quietly transitioned out of the Apex. A generous early retirement package would be offered, full pension, health benefits, a bonus substantial enough to ensure comfortable retirement. In return, he would sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements and non-disparagement clauses. He would agree never to discuss his observations about machine payouts with anyone, ever. The whole thing would be framed as a voluntary retirement, a celebrated conclusion to a distinguished career, and I would be promoted to Director of Security, replacing Vincent Marcuso, who was conveniently planning to retire within the month. Substantial raise, stock options in Holloway's Gaming Corporation, a position that would make me one of the youngest security directors on the Strip. All I had to do was convince my father to accept the retirement package and sign the agreements. Surely, I could make him understand that this was best for everyone, a good ending to a good career. I wanted to believe it was that simple. I wanted to believe this was just corporate risk management, overly cautious executives protecting their business from potential liability. I convinced myself that maybe my father was wrong about the machines, that my question about disclosure had been naive, that this retirement offer was genuinely generous. I should have known better. Las Vegas doesn't offer generous retirements to people who notice things they shouldn't notice. When I told my father about the retirement offer 2 days later, his reaction wasn't what I expected. He didn't seem surprised. He looked sad, resigned, like he'd been expecting something like this. He asked me directly if I understood what was really happening. I said I thought the casino was being overly cautious, but that the retirement package was genuinely good. He smiled sadly and said I was still young, still believed the system was fundamentally legitimate. He'd believed that too, for most of his career. But he'd been in Vegas long enough to recognize patterns, not just in cards and dice, but in how power operated. He told me the machines weren't just optimized within legal limits, they were rigged beyond legal limits, systematically defrauding players of millions, possibly billions. And the reason the casino could do it was because the regulatory system was captured, the auditors were compromised, and people like Richard Holloway were too powerful to touch. He said he wasn't going to accept the retirement offer. He was going to report his findings to the Nevada Gaming Control Board himself. He understood it might cost him his job, might even result in retaliation, but he'd spent 35 years believing in the integrity of the games. He wasn't going to spend his final years knowing he'd stayed silent about systematic fraud. I begged him not to do it. I explained that going against Holloway was pointless, that he'd be dismissed as a disgruntled employee, that the Gaming Control Board wouldn't take action against one of Nevada's most powerful casino operators based on one dealer's suspicions. I told him to take the money, enjoy retirement, leave the crusading to someone else. He refused. He said someone had to be willing to speak truth, even when it cost them everything. Especially when it cost them everything. That's what integrity meant. 2 days later, Vincent Marcuso called me into his office again. Same white noise generator, same closed door, but this time the conversation was different. He told me my father had indeed filed a complaint with the Gaming Control Board, exactly as I'd feared, but that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that my father's complaint had triggered a chain reaction. Other dealers at other Holloway properties had started asking similar questions. The Gaming Control Board, despite being generally friendly to the industry, was required to investigate formal complaints. An investigation, even one that ultimately found nothing, would attract media attention, investor concern, regulatory scrutiny, across multiple jurisdictions. This was now a crisis that threatened billions in market capitalization and hundreds of millions in annual profits. Holloway needed the problem solved immediately and permanently. And solving it required making my father into something he'd never been: a criminal, a degenerate, someone whose accusations could be dismissed as the desperate lies of a gambling addict trying to deflect from his own theft. Vincent laid out the plan with the detached professionalism of a man who'd done distasteful things before and would do them again. Over the next 2 weeks, evidence would be manufactured. My father would be documented as having severe gambling problems, debts to loan sharks, compulsive betting, financial desperation. Security footage would be edited to show him pocketing chips from the dealer tray during his shifts. Casino accounting records would show discrepancies in his table's hold percentage. Witnesses, other employees on Holloway's payroll, would provide statements about his erratic behavior and suspicious activities. Then, at the right moment, my father would be arrested on casino property for embezzlement and theft. The Gaming Control Board complaint would be reframed as a malicious attempt to deflect from his own crimes. His 35-year career would be retconned into a long con that had finally been exposed. His reputation would be destroyed so completely that nothing he said about machine rigging would ever be taken seriously. And my role in all of this would be critical. As his son and as head of security, I would need to be the one who presented the evidence, who signed off on the accusations, who testified about his crimes if it went to trial. The betrayal needed to be personal, familial, unquestionable. If his own son believed he was guilty, everyone would believe he was guilty. If I refused, Vincent said, the consequences would be immediate and fatal, not metaphorically, literally. My father would be killed and made to look like a suicide. I would be killed and made to look like an accident. Holloway had unlimited resources and no moral constraints. He would eliminate the problem by eliminating the people who constituted the problem. But if I cooperated, both my father and I would live. My father would go to prison for crimes he didn't commit. But prison was better than death. And I would continue my career, continue my rise, eventually take Vincent's position as director of security. I'd be complicit, but I'd be alive. My father would be imprisoned, but he'd be breathing. Vincent gave me 48 hours to decide. I spent those 48 hours in hell. I couldn't tell my father what was coming. Any warning would result in immediate elimination. I couldn't go to police. Holloway owned too many cops, had too many connections. I couldn't run. They'd find us, and running would just confirm guilt and accelerate the violence. The only choice was the impossible choice: save my father's life by destroying his life, or watch him die along with me. I chose life. I chose the coward's option, the pragmatic option, the option that let me tell myself I was choosing the lesser evil even though I knew I was just choosing evil. Over the next 3 weeks, I participated in the frame job. I signed documents falsifying my father's behavior. I reviewed edited security footage and certified it as authentic. I provided testimony to casino investigators about suspicious activities I'd never actually witnessed. I became the weapon they wielded against my father. The arrest happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Gaming Control Board agents and Las Vegas Metro Police entered the casino floor with media cameras following. They walked directly to my father's blackjack table, interrupted his game, and placed him in handcuffs. The charges were read aloud: embezzlement, theft, fraud. The players at his table watched in shock. His fellow dealers stood frozen. I watched from the surveillance room on monitors, watching my father's face as he was arrested for crimes I knew he hadn't committed. He didn't resist, didn't protest his innocence to the cameras. He just looked tired, defeated, like he'd known this was coming and had already accepted it. The trial was 3 months later. I testified for the prosecution. Under oath, I described my father's erratic behavior, his financial desperation, his suspicious activities around the dealer tray. I lied with a straight face in a courtroom, while my father sat at the defense table watching me destroy him. His attorney, a public defender overwhelmed with cases and facing a mountain of manufactured evidence, could do nothing against the narrative we'd constructed. The jury convicted after 4 hours of deliberation. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in Nevada State Prison. I visit him once a month at the prison in Indian Springs, an hour northwest of Las Vegas. These visits are monitored, supervised by casino security personnel who ensure I don't tell him the truth, don't slip up and reveal the frame job. We have superficial conversations about prison food and weather and nothing meaningful. He doesn't ask me why I testified against him. I think he knows, or at least suspects. I think he understands I chose his life over his freedom, his survival over his dignity. But understanding doesn't equal forgiveness. Every visit, I see the disappointment in his eyes. Not anger, that would be easier. Just profound sadness that his son, whom he'd raised with such care, had become the kind of person who would do what I did. I'm 32 years old. I'm director of security at the Apex Resort and Casino, one of the youngest in the industry. I make $275,000 a year plus bonuses. I have stock options worth millions. On paper, I'm a success story. A Vegas native who rose through the ranks through merit and dedication. In reality, I'm a prisoner, just like my father. I'm trapped in a system I can't escape, working for people I despise, perpetuating fraud that steals from millions of tourists who believe the games are fair. The slot machines at the Apex and every other Holloway property are rigged beyond legal limits through sophisticated software manipulation that adjusts payout percentages in real time based on player behavior and casino profit targets. The Nevada Gaming Control Board knows and doesn't care. Too many former board members work for Holloway. Too many current members hope to work for him after their government service ends. The fraud is massive, systematic, and completely unpunishable. Holloway and executives like him are too wealthy, too connected, too powerful. They sit on gaming commission advisory boards. They fund political campaigns. They employ thousands of workers who vote. They generate billions in tax revenue for the state. They're untouchable. And people like my father, honest employees who notice the fraud and dare to speak up, are crushed so efficiently that their destruction serves as warning to anyone else who might consider becoming a problem. I live in a luxury condo, overlooking the Strip. Every night, I watch the lights of the casinos, including my own, gleaming against the desert darkness. Those lights run on fraud. Every flash, every glow, every brilliant display is powered by stolen money, by rigged machines, by systematic theft disguised as entertainment. My father will be eligible for parole in 5 years if he maintains good behavior. He'll be 67 years old. His reputation destroyed, his career ended, his freedom stolen. All because he believed the games should be fair, because he thought integrity mattered, because he dared to notice what he wasn't supposed to notice. I destroyed him to save him. I became a monster to prevent worse monsters from killing us both. I tell myself it was the only choice, that anyone in my position would have done the same. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I know the truth. I had a choice. I chose survival over honor. I chose complicity over courage. I chose to be the weapon instead of the shield. This confession is the only act of resistance I have left. I'm recording this anonymously. uploading it through networks Holloway doesn't control, sharing it before I disappear, because I will disappear, one way or another, once this goes public. Either Holloway's people will eliminate me, or I'll run far enough and fast enough that I become someone else entirely. The slot machines you play in Las Vegas aren't random. They're rigged through legal loopholes and illegal manipulation that the regulatory system refuses to police. The jackpots you see on TV aren't lucky breaks. They're staged promotions designed to attract more victims. The casino executives who run these operations aren't businessmen. They're criminals who've purchased enough legitimacy that their crimes are called capitalism. And when someone inside the system discovers the fraud and tries to expose it, the system doesn't reform itself. It destroys the whistleblower, manufactures evidence, ruins reputations, and sends innocent people to prison, while the real criminals collect bonuses and buy politicians. My father was that whistleblower. I was the weapon they used to destroy him. And now, I'm trapped in the role I chose, enforcer for a criminal empire, prisoner of my own cowardice. If this story opened your eyes to the reality of how Las Vegas operates, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Share this everywhere. The gaming industry depends on silence, on everyone looking away, on employees being too frightened to speak truth. Your subscription matters, because it means this truth reaches more people, because it means my father's sacrifice wasn't completely meaningless. Hit that like button too. Every like pushes this story to more people. The algorithm doesn't care about justice, but it responds to engagement. So engage. Make this go viral. Force the Nevada Gaming Control Board to acknowledge what they've been ignoring. Force journalists to investigate. Force politicians to act. Don't let the casino industry bury this truth the way they've buried hundreds of other truths. My father's freedom is gone. My soul is gone. But this truth is yours now. What you do with it determines whether the system that destroyed us continues destroying others, or whether enough people finally see Las Vegas for what it really is, the biggest con in American history, where the real criminals wear suits and the real victims are everyone foolish enough to believe the games are fair. My real name is David Chen. I lied about nothing else in this confession. Every word is true. The slot machines are rigged. The casinos are running systematic fraud. The regulators are captured. And my father is in prison for the crime of telling the truth. If you're planning a trip to Vegas, save your money. The house doesn't just have an edge. The house is cheating. And if you think you can beat them anyway, remember this: they'll destroy anyone who gets close to exposing them. They destroyed my father. They destroyed me. They'll destroy you too, if you become inconvenient. Welcome to Las Vegas, where everything is a lie, including the idea that anyone ever really wins.